How's it going guys, Kris here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a really powerful gun in Battlefield 5, the Boys AT rifle. An anti-materiel weapon for the recon class that became available in Tides of War Chapter 3. In the year of 1937, Captain Henry C. Boys developed an anti-tank rifle at the Royal Small Arms Factory in Enfield. His final design would be approved for service the same year, but just a few days before it did, the captain unfortunately died. So as a sign of respect to pay tribute, the rifle was named after him. The Boys rifle was a heavy 5-shot bolt-action weapon designed for taking on light armour and vehicles, and it was used in the early stages of World War II in the hands of Allied forces. It was a pretty effective gun at the start, but as the war rolled on, tanks got stronger and were reinforced with better armour, making the Boys rifle almost obsolete, incapable of doing the same kind of damage it could before. As you'd probably expect from an old gun that fired 55 caliber bullets, the Boys rifle wasn't exactly a very fun or comfortable thing to use in combat, as although it was fitted with a cushioned butt pad, the recoil of the weapon was so immense that it was often prone to bruising the shoulder of its user and causing painful neck strain. Not to mention the noise and muzzle flash caused when firing would have been pretty disorienting too. It was eventually replaced in the European theatre by the Piat launcher in 1943. Though it was still used in smaller numbers for attacking machine gun nests, bunkers and light vehicles, even seeing action in the Pacific Theatre against light and medium Japanese tanks, where it remained in use by the Allies right up until the war's end. Moving over to the Battlefield 5 stats now, starting off with Lethality, which is a pretty nice place to set off with this gun in particular, with it being such a dangerous thing to use. The Boys rifle delivers a knockout punch to infantry right the way up to 100 meters, dealing 100 damage for a body shot or 200 damage for a headshot, which is practically overkill. 100 meters is where the damage starts to decline, which is where the Boys rifle turns into a 2-shot kill weapon, with its damage eventually dropping down to as low as 72 at 200 meters and beyond. So this is a very high amount of damage in relation to other bolt action weapons, though the Boys rifle does have a 0.85 modifier for limb shots, meaning it's not always going to be a guaranteed one-hit kill within 100 meters, and with it only firing at 22 or 25 RPM, this is far slower than a lot of other bolt action weapons too, leaving you extremely vulnerable and open to attack if that first shot doesn't do the trick. It fires a little bit faster than the Panzerbuch, though deals a tad less damage as a trade-off, which might make the Boys rifle slightly less effective at finishing off wounded enemies if your shot hits their limbs, though should at least allow you to get that second shot out a tad quicker. Obviously being designed for taking on tanks, the Boys rifle can be quite effective at damaging vehicles too, especially with the APCR bullets, and especially when those vehicles are light on armour, being capable of dispatching some of the weaker ones in just a shot or two. Firing off those huge rounds doesn't come without its recoil, as the Boys AT rifle's got quite a lot of that. Each shot's going to be subjected to tons of vertical kick with an upwards value of 20, so even though it's got a bipod, which needs to be used if you want to use the gun accurately, it's still going to fly upwards quite a lot after every pull of the trigger. With that said, just like with the other bolt action weapons, this isn't too much of a problem, as you're going to need to unscope after every shot anyway to cycle the bolt. So although this violent recoil can be toned down a bit with a recoil buffer to a still wild but not quite as wild value of 16, recoil with the Boys rifle isn't really going to impact the gun's precision as you play, like it would with some of the other weapons. Those heavy bullets that the Boys rifle fires do fly at a very slow pace though, with the gun having a pretty rubbish muzzle velocity of just 400 meters per second, along with slightly more drag than your typical bolt action gun too. The bullet speed can be increased to 460 meters per second, and the drag effect slightly lightened with the high velocity bullet spec. But not very much, as it's still going to seem quite tricky to use against players far away. Not too bad against stationary targets, slow moving tanks and prone snipers, though you'll definitely need to lead your enemy's movements if they're running around in the distance, sometimes making the Boys rifle quite awkward to aim with, limiting its ease of use over longer ranges. Having a 6-round ammo capacity isn't exactly a great number to have, though considering you'll often need only one bullet at a time to put players down, this at least makes that mag size a bit more bearable. It might not be quite as generous as the Panzerbuch, which can hold almost twice as much ammo at once, but it should feel fine enough for general play, especially with it using detachable box magazines, where all of its ammo can be reloaded in one consistent move. Those reloads are generally quite decent considering the power of the gun, with tactical reloads taking 4.2 seconds and empties taking 5 seconds, both of which can be lowered with the quick reload spec too, if you want to get back into the action a bit quicker. And with the boys AT rifle being more of a defensive gun, these reloads shouldn't really give you too many problems. Though because you are restricted to using a bipod for your shots to be accurate, this is going to limit the gun's mobility and usefulness in a lot of situations. Of course, you can hip-fire the boys rifle to snuff out close-range targets quickly, but that's only really going to be doable if they're pretty nearby, and it can often be a pretty tricky thing to do consistently, due to the lower accuracy of your shot and due to the weapon's slow fire rate, meaning if you miss, you're practically dead, making the boys rifle a fairly risky but sometimes rewarding thing to use in close quarters. So for the specializations, at the top, we've got slings and swivels on the left, recoil buffer on the right. And because the recoil isn't really going to impact your performance due to you needing to rechamber your next round after every shot, slings and swivels seems like the much more viable option here, which will be handy for boosting deploy speeds for sidearms and gadgets. Below this, you'll be able to find the flashless propellant and machine bolt specs, lowering muzzle flash and slightly increasing the fire rate. Though on the other side, variable zeroing and quick reload. Both sides are only going to offer marginal improvements, but because the reloads seem fine enough as they are, I tend to prefer going for the left side, giving the fire rate a slight edge, while making your position a bit less obvious with the flashless propellant, being a tad harder to spot in the distance as you fire the gun off, which can be pretty handy in Battlefield 5, with player visibility not always being the best. And last of all, at the very bottom, you can find APCR bullets on the left side, slightly increasing damage to vehicles and fortifications, and on the right, high velocity bullets, which, let's be honest, still aren't exactly high velocity bullets, but do increase bullet speed by a tiny bit. This is a subjective one and mainly depends on how often you like to take on vehicles, but I generally prefer running with APCR bullets just to make the gun slightly better at finishing off tanks and blowing up some of the weaker vehicles more consistently, especially with high velocity bullets only offering such a small advantage. So in conclusion, the boys AT rifle is more of a situational weapon that can be really deadly with its one-hit kill potential up to 100 meters, but at the same time quite dependent on your accuracy and your ability to lead moving targets. The slow but powerful nature of the rifle makes it more of a defensive weapon overall, best suited for ranges below 100 meters where you can often take players down in one shot, but beyond closer ranges where the gun can often be a far riskier thing to use, with missed shots increasing the time to kill significantly, making you really vulnerable against your attackers, and with the gun's slow fire rate making it incapable of dealing with multiple opponents in quick succession. Having a similar ammo capacity to the bolt-action rifles, while having detachable box magazines, does make the gun fairly reliable, as it might not hold tons of ammo at once, but at least its reloads are quite consistent. However, its low muzzle velocity and high bullet drop is often going to make the gun harder to use over longer ranges, perhaps making it less suitable for counter-sniping, especially beyond 100 meters where 2 bullets will often be needed to kill your opponent, giving them a distinct advantage. And with you being practically forced to use your bipod to gain any kind of precision, this is going to limit your maneuverability and put even more pressure on you to land your shots successfully. But with the boys rifle being more than capable of knocking down infantry while able to assist your team to take on those vehicles, this still gives it quite a lot of use as a defensive multi-purpose weapon, rewarding precise aiming and smart positioning. So that's it for another one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the guide. Give me a like if you did, and subscribe for more Battlefield content on my channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in that next one.